In a laboratory in Japan, a cell that had been dead for 28,000 years did something it was never supposed to do again. It stirred, not fully alive, no heartbeat, no breath, just the faint electrical ghost of biological activity, flickering for a few moments inside tissue, taken from a creature that vanished before farming, before writing, before human history had properly begun. Scientists watched it happen, and then it stopped. But the message was already clear. Something in there still remembered how to be alive. And it is not the only one. Right now, in laboratories from Texas to Siberia, researchers are pulling the giants of the Ice Age out of the permafrost. Animals with their fur, their skin, their last meal still inside them, and asking a question that used to belong to science fiction. Not what was this animal, but can we bring it back? These are the 5 they're starting with, and number 1 is closer than you think. For 200 years, extinction meant one thing: gone, permanently, forever, a door that only swings one way. But the permafrost has been quietly breaking that rule. It is the largest freezer on Earth, and for 50,000 years, it has kept Ice Age animals not as fossils, not as bones, as bodies, whole enough that scientists can read their DNA, whole enough to ask whether the door might swing back. In the next 10 minutes, we're counting down 5 frozen giants at the center of the race to reverse extinction, and the last one is the animal the entire effort is built around. Stay to the end, because what's already happened in the lab is stranger than the fiction it came from. First, why this is even possible. When one of these animals died and was buried fast in freezing mud, the permafrost did something no ordinary grave can. It stopped time. No oxygen, no bacteria, no rot, just deep, permanent cold, holding fur and skin and cells in place for tens of thousands of years. Most fossils are stone. The original animal is long gone. These aren't fossils. The animal is still here, and that difference, bone versus body, is the whole reason de-extinction has stopped being a fantasy and started becoming a project. Let's start the countdown. Number 5. In 2014, a hunter in the Abiski district of Siberia spotted a shape in a frozen riverbank and thought he'd found a dead reindeer. He hadn't. He'd found a baby woolly rhinoceros from a species gone for roughly 10,000 years. They named it Sasha, after the man who cut it out of the ice. And here's the wonderful part. When it first came out of the ground, it looked gray. Cleaned up, its true coat appeared. Thick, strawberry blonde curls. For a century we had pictured woolly rhinos, only from bones and faded cave paintings. Sasha simply showed us, 34,000 years after it died, exactly what we'd only been guessing at. The stubs of its horns, its ears, its eyes, the soft tissue of its mouth, all still there, on an animal that was only about 7 months old when it died. Sasha didn't just preserve a body. It preserved information, coat color, anatomy, and DNA intact enough to sequence. And a sequenced genome is the first thing you need if you ever want to build the animal again. Number 4 came out of Alaska in 1979, with the story of its own death written into its skin. Gold miners were melting frozen mud with a hydraulic hose when a carcass appeared. A steppe bison, an Ice Age giant, dead for at least 36,000 years. A mineral in the permafrost had stained its skin a strange metallic blue, so they called it Blue Babe. Across its hide were rake marks and puncture wounds, the signature, researchers found, of an American lion, one of the great Ice Age cats. The bison froze so fast after the attack that the wounds never healed and never faded. A single winter's afternoon from 36,000 years ago held perfectly in place. And then the scientists studying it did something you don't forget. They cut a little meat from its neck, simmered it into a stew, and ate it, to mark the excavation. By their own account, the meat was tough and deeply aged. The meal went ahead anyway. It's a strange human footnote to a body so intact that, tens of thousands of years on, it could still, technically, be served for dinner. That's the level of preservation the permafrost is capable of. Number 3 is the one that changed everything. And I have to be honest with you about it, because the honesty is the interesting part. This animal did not come out of the ice. It came out of fossils, and it's the reason the rest of this list is no longer just a dream. In 2025, the company Colossal Biosciences announced 3 white pups, Romulus, Remus, and Khaleesi, that they called dire wolves, the Ice Age predator that died out around 10,000 years ago. They'd read ancient DNA from a 13,000-year-old tooth and a 72,000-year-old skull, identified the genes that made a dire wolf, and edited those changes into the cells of a modern gray wolf. Here's the part the headlines skipped. These are not resurrected dire wolves. As the scientists themselves have put it, they're gray wolves with around 20 genetic edits, an animal engineered to look like the original, not a genome brought back from the dead. And that distinction matters. But strip away the hype, and something real remains. For the first time, a team took an extinct animal's traits and put them into a living creature that was born, and breathed, and walked. That is the proof of concept. That is the door swinging, even if just a crack. And it's exactly the method now aimed at the frozen giants, still waiting in the ice. Number 2 may be the best preserved Ice Age animal ever found, anywhere. Her name is Sparta, a cave lion cub pulled from the Siberian permafrost, from a species that vanished at the end of the Ice Age. She came out so intact that researchers described her as frozen mid-nap. Her fur, her whiskers, her teeth, the soft pads of her paws, the tiny wrinkles still in the skin, even her internal organs, preserved. She was around 28,000 years old, and she looked days old, only 1 or 2 months into her life when she died, with no sign a predator ever touched her. Scientists still can't say for certain how she ended up in the ice. A cub that never got to grow up, kept whole and perfect for longer than all of recorded human history. And a body preserved to that degree isn't just beautiful. It's a genetic library, intact cells, readable DNA, the raw material a de-extinction lab dreams of. If we ever bring a cave lion back, it will start with a cub like Sparta, which brings us to number 1, the animal we began with, and the animal the entire race is built around. In 2010, on the Laptev Sea coast of northern Siberia, a young female woolly mammoth came out of the permafrost. They named her Yuka. She still had her woolly coat, that reddish hair, her trunk, her skin, and something no other mammoth has ever given us, her brain, still inside her skull, its folds and structures intact. To this day, Yuka is the only mammoth ever found with a preserved brain. But this is the moment that stopped the world. In 2019, a team in Japan took cell nuclei from Yuka's tissue and placed them into the egg cells of a mouse, and some of them answered, faint signs of biological activity. Not life, not a heartbeat, but the ghost of it, stirring in cells from an animal gone for tens of thousands of years. That flicker is why laboratories now believe the impossible might be within reach. To take DNA from mammoths like Yuka and, using the same gene editing method that made those wolf pups, engineer a living, cold-adapted elephant that looks and behaves like a woolly mammoth. The company leading that effort is aiming for its first calves before the end of this decade. It won't be a pure mammoth. It'll be a hybrid, built the way the dire wolves were built, but an animal that left this earth thousands of years before we invented writing, could be walking a frozen field again within our lifetimes. For 2 centuries, extinction was the one truly permanent thing. These 5 frozen giants are the reason that sentence now ends with a question mark. Sasha showed us the color of a lost world. Blue Babe showed us a single ancient afternoon. The dire wolves showed us the door could open. Sparta and Yuka may show us how to walk back through it. Whether we should is a different question, and one the scientists are still arguing over, but the ice isn't waiting for us to decide. Every year it melts a little more, and every year it hands back another giant, perfectly kept, as if it simply lay down last week. This is the channel that goes looking for them. Next time, the Ice Age predator that hunted us, and may have kept humans out of an entire continent. It's on your screen now. I'll see you in the ice.